Welcome back, venturers. It's time for another discussion about VNs. I am Amar, and together with Tauros, we bring another Readport. Okay, listen. Once again, I failed to appease the VN purist by pursuing and reading a title that barely qualifies as a VN even in my standards. So Tauros, you will need to step up and redeem this episode with a VN of your own that you've read recently. So what say you, Tavarish?
No worries. And yes, today I have something very interesting and thought-provoking to talk about. A free visual novel by the name of Z.A.T.O. I love everything. Give me 1 second. Here we go. Z.A.T.O is a very interesting title. It's a free visual novel set in the Soviet Union in the 80s in the city Vorkta 5. Our main character is a high school girl by the name of Asya. Also, as a side note, I don't know Russian or any of these sorts of names, so if I mispronounce anything, I hope everyone will forgive me. Asya is a weak-willed girl. She is somewhat bullied in class, and she's very withdrawn and unsure of herself, more the sort to immerse herself in her writings and some art and her own internal monologues about how the world works. As for the story, a girl goes missing, and this main character, Asya, and a few others, investigate this disappearance and the strange mysteries behind it all. I hesitate to say that Z.A.T.O is a mystery VN, which I suppose you could say it is, but rather the emphasis is on its characters and their own musings about the world and their own introspectives about themselves. I'm not too familiar with Denpa genre, but I think some people have mentioned that Z.A.T.O is a Denpa VN, and from what little I know about it, I'm inclined to believe that. So I think you could say that that's the vibe, that's the atmosphere that Z.A.T.O is going for. Because that's one of this VN's strengths. I very much enjoyed its atmosphere. It has a dreary, I guess you could say, lack of hope that permeates, every line, every setting involved. Even though they're trying to solve this, disappearance case here, there's very little hope involved. And whenever there is a little bit of hope, it tends to get snuffed out sooner rather than later. And this kind of hopelessness also, runs parallel to our main character, Asya's struggles, as she tries to accomplish some things in her life, and yet there are setbacks, and yet there are some successes. But when it's just us, following this main character and all of her very random tangents in her head, it's very easy to get distracted of what the real goal of this is and wonder if we're making any progress at all. Are we? Are we not? Or are we going down a completely different line of thinking? These are the kind of questions that Z.A.T.O just kind of submerges itself in. What's funny is that the atmosphere reminds me a lot of Cartogra, and I guess you could say the Innocent Grey titles. The winter setting is very oppressive. The visuals of snow falling down and coating the atmosphere really adds to the depressing nature that goes on in this title. I mentioned before that the main character, is, like I said, is kind of a pushover. And I guess that's one, heads up here, is that the first third of this title follows her as the main character. And the events of the story and her own mentality, it really hammers into you, the reader, that she is getting absolutely worn down in her sad little life. It's very depressing. I don't want to make... I'm an uncultured American, so I don't want to make any sweeping, references or disclaimers about Russian literature. I could feel some of the despair involved. I'm wondering if that's what it's like for other classics.
I mean, I'm trying to understand what constitutes a denpa by what you brought up. Aspect being atmosphere, maybe the tone of the title. I'm looking also very intently at the pictures running in the background that you prepared regarding that title, and I can't ignore the clash between the backgrounds that are very dreary, and some of them even depict the communist Soviet backgrounds, like from the shop background specifically. Contrasting that with just anime girls at the front that are very colorful.
Yes, it has an anime art style, but it also goes for the classic indie VN blurred real-life pictures as background shots. That's always a nostalgic, charming style.
True, especially since a lot of those backgrounds are very rusty, unpolished, decaying, and then you have a crispy and clean anime girls at the forefront. I'm like,
What's funny is that some of the CGs also follow that, I guess you could say, style. Some of them are quite vibrant, lively, and then there are other CGs that are definitely dreary or emotionally intense. And I think Z.A.T.O's style is another huge point for it. You mentioned, checking out some of these, images as they scroll by and how it relates to the whole denpa genre.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's a two-pronged front. On the one hand, there's the denpa side of things, where, like I mentioned, there's a lot of philosophical ramblings. The main character has a very unique take on the world, of the will of the universe. She is just one weak-willed person, and yet she tries to exert her signal to the heavens, and to send her message of love to the whole world. And, through this viewpoint, we go on a lot of tangents in her head about what that means for her interactions with her other classmates, how she views her friendships, why she takes the actions that she does. I really enjoy this as a visual novel because, visual novels give us a lot of opportunities to see these character monologues and to really dive into their inner ways of thinking. And so, I mean, the denpa, you can feel that in the various philosophical ramblings, and, there's that always sense of how supernatural is this story? How much of it is rooted firmly in reality in that, a period piece of the Soviet Union in the 80s, versus, is there anything more going on underneath the surface? And that's kind of the ever-present question in something like Z.A.T.O, where you're constantly doubting yourselves, and then at some point you gotta wonder how much are the characters doubting themselves.
I need to ask, but you speak all of that, but wasn't the point of having some sort of investigation going on? I'm trying to decipher the story. Oh, okay.
Yes,
So
exactly.
during the course of that investigation, you have a inner monologue and a retrospective of current events. Okay.
Yes. And I mentioned that even though this is, a mystery, and that's the core plotline of this visual novel, the mystery is more of a backseat, to be honest. It's more of just, it's the explanation for why the plot advances as it does. But everything, all the scenes in between the lines, all of the other, I guess you could say filler is the real meat of this title. All of the main character's monologues, all of her interactions with her friends, with her enemies, with her family, those are all the real, in-depth character analysis that you can do with a title like this. In fact, Z.A.T.O, This really strikes me as a very artistic title. There's a lot of style in this. There's the very bleak, monochrome, barren UI. You have a text box with that the classic old-timey font.
Yeah.
You have occasional snow animations that go beyond just what you see from the text box and the typical background box, in terms of breaking down the barriers. There's a few times when the the VN style goes from being ADV to NVL, to where the text, is aligned all over the screen. And they always do that for dramatic effects. There are times in the story that these kinds of intense changes, these shakeups, they feel like they're tied together with the events that are going on to enhance the experience. I've said it before many times that I love visual novels because of all the different ways that they can provide a narrative experience. You've got the visuals, you've got the soundtrack, you've got the sprites, even some animation sometimes. And I think they're all great ways to contribute to telling a story, sharing those emotions. And Z.A.T.O does it well. It's the little things that combine together. I always like titles that, use a visual novel to its full potential. And this is one that tries to. I really respect that.
I could agree. When VNs take full advantage of not only being a medium to convey inner monologue, but also breaking down the norm of how the text is structured and breaking down quite literally, like you said, UI and its own rules. You have a text box dedicated for a backdrop, but then again, for certain aspects, they say, nah, this time it's full screen background change. Let me freeze your entire UI. Feel the Russia, okay?
Mm-hmm. There's a few times where the text speed becomes fixed. There's usually,
okay.
As normally with a visual novel, it comes out one letter at a time, and you can adjust the text speed to go faster or slower. There are a few times when it comes out instantly, so it's just batches of words and phrases and sentences at once. There are other times where there's I guess fixed delays, so it makes it cinematic for the timings.
I personally have a lot of umbrage with those segments.
Oh, really?
When I lose control over advancing text. I understand why, because they try to create a moment. For example, there is a reveal and slowly the letters are forming instead of whatever speed you chose, or maybe the opposite happening. You, from the standpoint of a main character, are overwhelmed with an information flood, quite literally flooding on the screen. Therefore, it's rendering at the same speed to sell the moment. Mm-hmm. I get it. I personally like to have control over text, okay?
Yeah, that's true. I remember, back in the days when you're a kid and, you're playing a video game and you're in the middle of a cutscene and your parents tell you to come down for dinner or something. You're like, no, I can't pause.
What an example, okay?
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and another, quick and easy example of Z.A.T.O's style is that we see the main character sprite in the bottom right of the text box. And that's a cool thing that some visual novels do, especially otome VNs. But in this case, Asya is always shown at that 45-degree angle. All the other character sprites are standing vertical and normal like you'd expect in any other title. But, our main character is there at that Dutch angle, the one it's designed to create tension in the reader's mind. And just something as little as that, even though, it doesn't seem like much, it's ever present throughout the entire story. You see our main character, at a very different angle, an unnatural angle, and it doesn't seem right. But speaking of which, of what I liked about Z.A.T.O, like I mentioned, there's a lot of the little style points that I really admire in this. The mystery, I know I've talked about it a little and how it's not exactly the focus, but even then, it's still layered very well. The mystery adds to the atmosphere a lot. I like the pacing. I feel like there's important clues that are drip-fed to us along the way, and we're given time to ruminate on the events as they're happening. And in the meantime, we get to see the characters, try and go about things on their own. Because like I said, it's that very human element. It's not just about a girl disappearing, it's about the effect it has on our main character, on Mariana, on her family and the other residents. And when we get to see those dynamics and the consequences involved, that's what really makes us feel for the characters. And I think the mystery does a good job of not forgetting that human aspect of it. And of course, the writing is fantastic. A lot of the dialogue felt so natural between the characters. Like all of the funny hangout parts were full of jokes and friends messing around and goofing off, even when it's about nonsense and silly stuff. And a lot of Asia's inner monologues are also just written very well, very descriptive, and yet still easygoing and very flowing. There's some titles you read where it practically feels like a textbook, with how just wooden and stilted and informal it is. But pretty much everything written in Z.A.T.O is very natural. It's the kind of thing that you absolutely could hear yourself, speaking out loud. I think those kinds of writing, that tier of writing is always what separates a lot of good VNs from being just phenomenal VNs. So I really admire that in Z.A.T.O.
With all that said, with all that gloating about the atmosphere and writing, you understand that this conversation is heading into a point in which I have to ask you, because this is another VN you've read. Is it afflicted with a tower's curse, or did you enjoy the conclusion? You don't need to spoil what it was, but did you enjoy it? Was it cursed?
I kinda didn't like the ending.
Oh, obviously.
Don't get me wrong, it's good. It's good, all in all, I very much enjoyed Z.A.T.O, and the ending is good, but, without going into spoilers, I felt like they left a lot of meat still on the bone. I was like,
okay.
we were getting to the ending, and you can read a title and you get that feeling of, everything's building up to the big dramatic finish. And I'm thinking like, okay, there's no way we're doing that now, right? There's going to be some events that happen in the meantime, because this seems really weird to just rush it unnecessarily, right? But no, that's how it went. And yes, it was a nice ending, and I'm happy for it. I like I said, without going into spoilers, I thought that there were a few things we could have gone more into and more that I wanted to see. Because there's two main, I guess there's two main emotional storylines going on in Z.A.T.O. One is, the missing girl, her condition, her struggles, what's going on in her life. And there's a lot of focus given to this, and what it means on the deeper layers of the story and the other characters. And then there's another, emotional storyline that's going on with Asya and her history and how it involves someone named Tosia, who we don't ever see or hear much of. It's kind of just left vaguely, it's intentionally shrouded in mystery there. So you have these two separate plot lines, and the one with the missing girl kind of, it builds and it builds, and you get more revelations, and there's the mystery, and then it just kind of stops. Like I said, to get to the ending, right when we were just getting into more and more juicier and interesting aspects. And instead, we get the stuff with Asya and Tosia to dominate the ending, when it didn't really feel too built up. Maybe that was intentional. Maybe, that's how, the author wanted to leave things like that. But I don't know. So I don't really agree with how it was done, and I feel like there could have been a lot more. I kind of wanted to see more. I don't know. At the very least,
Okay.
my criticism with the story and the ending with Z.A.T.O, at the very least, you could say it was the author's stylistic choice, and I would be okay with that. So that's a lot better than you can say with some, criticisms I've had with other titles. So I'd say
Okay,
that's a
but
positive.
without going too much into spoilers, obviously, because I don't want to ask about the details. Fine. But considering you say it had more material and left at a point they could maybe explore something more before the end, sure. Okay. Which is worse then? A premature ending or multiple fake outs before the final ending?
I've
Because
always
I've
thought of that
experienced
too.
both. And now hearing you talk, how you weren't quick to say unsatisfying it was, but it kept you lingering for more, right?
Yes, that's always the question. Would you rather have an ending that leaves the reader wanting more, or would you rather have an ending that, wears out its welcome?
Yeah, exactly. That's well put. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because I don't want to spoil which titles that I've read had that, but I read a couple of titles that had an ending after which you read and the story moves on. I'm like, what? Why? Why would you do that? Okay, finally you get to the ending number 2, so to speak. And the game's like, hold up, we're not done yet. I'm like, oh my god. Just let it end.
So like I said, I can't complain about Z.A.T.O too much. I think I would prefer it that way. I think I would prefer an ending that leaves you wanting more.
Okay.
There's another criticism I have. I mentioned that, Z.A.T.O is a Denpa story, and it has that, I guess you could say, atmospheric horror. It's not exactly a scary VN, but it's very unsettling, and there's a lot that's left up to your imagination and to keep you in the dark and unsettled. There is one segment in Z.A.T.O that just goes entirely into horror. And, instead of being the background atmospheric stuff, it's very in your face and brash. This segment is good, and, it ties itself in with the VN as a whole very well. I didn't like it, though, because that kind of poisoned my experience with the entire rest of the VN. I couldn't really enjoy the atmospheric aspects anymore because I spent the whole time kind of freaking out, jumping at shadows sort of thing. Because I'll admit it, I'm a wuss when it comes to horror. I cannot handle anything horror at all. So maybe that's just me being a wuss about it. Other people would probably be fine. Or they think I'm overreacting or something. Alright, that's fair, but still. I didn't like it. And I think that's one part of the title that really soured my opinion on it.
Okay, that's an interesting to hear that you have encountered a single moment, or at least maybe a segment in the title that can be summed up with just, you know what, Taurus, grow a pair. Okay.
You know what? Maybe that's just the answer. Maybe this was training for myself.
Okay.
Oh, God. Anyways, but all in all, I very much enjoyed Z.A.T.O. I would recommend it to a lot of other people if they enjoyed it. It's free, like I mentioned, and it's relatively short. It's about 7 hours and stuff. So, all in all, I really enjoyed getting a deeper dive at the characters. I remember before we were talking about Geminism, and that had a relatively small cast, and we were mentioning how I really wanted to see more of the character depth involved. And it's funny, because here's Z.A.T.O. I read something. It also has a pretty small cast, and yet we get so much of the character interactions and their inner workings and the relationships. And it's like, yes, this is what I wanted. Thank you. Overall, yeah, I very much enjoyed it. Z.A.T.O. I love the world and everything in it. Very good. 2 thumbs up.
Nice. I'd rather not comment on the Geminism part because I'm trying actively to forget that title, but sure.
Oh no. I'm so sorry for bringing it up again.
Yeah, fine. I wasn't planning to sleep today anyway.
So that's what I've been up to the past month. What have you been doing, Amar?
I've been busy. November is definitely not my month when it comes to free time. I often am busy with family stuff. But yesterday, since the day of the recording is the last day of November, so yesterday, 29th, they released Black Souls 2. Mm-hmm. So that's the title I've been reading ever since they released it on Steam. Oh boy. What a title. Immediately, when I saw that, I bought it, downloaded it, and found my notes. Black Souls 1. As you mentioned, when talking about Z.A.T.O, you told me that there is a character in the story that was mentioned but never shown and never appears. And I'm like, okay, I'm prepared. I have heard about this character from Black Souls 1 that hasn't appeared. Surely that person will be in Black Souls 2. So far, I still don't know. I still haven't finished the title. I have all my notes. But unlike Black Souls 1, I feel like Black Souls 2 goes immediately 100% crazy from the beginning. Mm-hmm. How Black Souls 1 started, you start with amnesia, you are in the forest, try to figure out what is happening, and slowly craziness appears. In the second title, it's crazy all the time, from the first minute.
Mm-hmm. So is Black Souls 2 is Black Souls 2 a direct sequel?
I don't know.
I
don't know. It's too crazy right now.
Interesting.
To find any connections. To dial it back, Black Souls 1 was a title that tries to, I feel like, emulate Dark Souls, those Western games by From Software, style of environmental storytelling, to blend that with VNs in a very distinct stylistic art style and vibe by trying to show corrupted fairy tales, mostly from the Brother Grimm, but some others too. In the Black Souls 2, so far it was all Alice in the Wonderland, and it's as crazy from the first moment as that book is. So from the first moment, everything is happening. I'm opening doors that are floating in space. I'm like, what is going on? I feel like they are trying to squeeze as much juice from RPG Maker as they can, because they are doing so much hilarious stuff. Some of the sprites. So think about game engine, right? That's in. Like, you have basic sprites, basic sounds, and they squeezing that engine to the maximum, because I can't even begin to describe how much funny stuff they are doing. So in a normal RPG Maker game, you go into the building, you open doors, you go to the next zone, etc. Here in this title, stuff is happening all the time. You are moving through a corridor, and then you hear doors opening, closing all the time. Then you move forward and you see those doors closing and opening all the time, making noise. Some are suspended mid-air. What is going on? It's complete chaos. And it kinda, that's why I like how you were talking about Z.A.T.O in environmental storytelling, that kind of Denpa atmosphere. This tries to sell that atmosphere. You are in the crazy land. Mm-hmm. I expect the unexpected. You open the door and it leads you back to the door you opened. Like, why? what is happening? Where the fuck do I go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Brothers Grimm fairy tales and Alice in Wonderland, they have that, that fantasy aspect of nonsense involved. And I know it's a popular setting, it's popular characters and tropes to borrow from, but that's always been the magic of it in my eyes, is just seeing how wild, how silly you can get with it. And then you get that silliness combined with the very brutal and, I guess you could say, in some ways, gory and scary nature of like Dark Souls 2.
So far, yes.
Ooh.
I'm not sure from where they have all the references from. I don't know if it's just an edgy humor of how about rabbits, but they are killer rabbits, or what is happening. Maybe they are aping Monty Python.
I didn't want to say
rabbits. I don't know, but it kind of seems like that.
Killer rabbits!
Yeah, exactly.
Oh gosh.
It's crazy. And it's actually funny. It also got me thinking when we did an episode about main girls, right? And I expressed like, on average, I tend to dislike the default heroines, the main heroine, etc. And in Black Souls, I'm playing the most default character every single time.
Oh,
so for
gosh.
the protagonist, I'm the opposite. The game says, oh, this is a gameplay view and you can have any choice. You can play a mage, a thief. I'm like, no, I'm a knight. Let's go crazy.
The human knight with two-handed greatsword.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And the game is like, yeah, and enjoy the chaos. For example, there was a dead end. Okay, you enter a room. There doesn't seem to be anything connecting next, so a dead end, except for one item that sits in the middle that says drink me. I'm like, oh my god, why? This is so suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god.
Scary.
It's crazy pants.
Yes, okay, so I guess one last question to cap things off. Do you think Black Souls 2 is a visual novel? I know there's some, argument and contention over how much an RPG Maker game can be considered a visual novel, how much overlap there is. But, what are your thoughts about the situation?
I feel like, and I'll try to make that argument using my knowledge from Black Souls 1, because I'm too early to say for the second title. But in my opinion, and honestly, this also goes back to Demon's Roots as well. In my opinion, it all goes back to emphasis. And in both Demon's Roots, as was the case in Black Souls 1, there is such a huge emphasis on dialogue and events with characters, with talking, that I feel like it's very close to being villain. I think the density of conversation and such was higher in Demon's Roots, so I would more confidently call Demon's Roots a VN than Black Souls 1. I feel like it's very close, but probably isn't a VN. I mean, it won't stop me from playing it anyway, but I hesitate to call it a VN. It's very close though, given the amount of conversation, dialogue options, choices, and sometimes even, how do I say it? Choices that aren't necessarily choose from dialogue boxes. Because in Black Souls 1, you could have choices that are more than just pick from set of those three, but rather, did you do X, Y, and Z? And if so, that will lead to this kind of progression of dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Like how you've acted in the game and what gameplay choices you've
about
made.
to say, yeah. Yeah, I'm about to say that the consequences of game actions you took during the gameplay segments.
Nice. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting, multifaceted question there. That's how it always tends to be with visual novel definitions, huh?
True.
But yeah, I hope that means you enjoy the rest of Black Souls 2 as you explore.
Yep. So far, it got me, okay? Immediately, it got me. I'm not ending. I need to finish this one.
Nice.
Yep.
And that about wraps it up for this month's Readport. It's a very interesting title between two very interesting, visual novels / games. They are both very striking in their own unique ways. Z.A.T.O and Black Souls 2. Nice.
Yep. And prepare for the next Readport. I think it might be in the new year now, right? And I'll talk about more.
Perhaps. So yeah, we'll definitely expect to see more out of you with this title.
Yeah. Thanks to our listeners, and VNture out.
VNture out.